presentation. We're going to pick it up at this slide again. So synergy is that kind of optimal state of group work. Okay, those of you who are performers or athletes, etc., or work in groups a lot, you're going to know it as kind of that zone that you get in sometimes when you're all just working together at the best level of performance, and that's when groups outperform individuals. Okay, so that just means that groups can be greater than the sum of their parts. If you were to do the task, if your boss gave 5 of his employees a task and said, you do each these 5 different things and come together and put it all together, as opposed to putting them in a group and saying, okay, as a group you tackle this task. We don't need to get into equifinality, but let me say that leadership is a huge part of group success. Not all scholars agree on this completely. Personally, I think it's extremely important. And leadership comes in a lot of different forms too, so it's not just a cookie cutter idea. You can be a leader in many, many different ways, but I think that when it comes to groups, it really helps to have that. And you can have more than 1 or 2 leaders in a group. People can share leadership tasks. One of the things that we really don't have time to talk about is that the idea of people not contributing. That's the number one thing that people identify as not liking to work in groups, and that doesn't make them too happy when that happens. However, I want to, and understandably, but I want to put it out there that all contributions don't need to be equal for groups to be successful. So you don't want to be too concerned with everybody doing exactly the same amount. One person can put in half the time of another and actually contribute more to the group. So don't get too caught up in thinking that everything has to be equal. As members of the group, you're equal, but your contributions don't have to be perfectly equal. Cohesion, otherwise known as closeness or group spirit, is fostered by communication that highlights similarities between members, common interests, values, goals, experiences, and ways of thinking. Okay, it's nice to be in a cohesive group, absolutely. That's something that can certainly lead to satisfaction, and satisfaction is important. People need to be happy for the group to be successful. Size is also an important element in groups that we're not going to be able to really explore in much depth, but clearly a group of 3 is not the same as a group of 11, right? A group of 11 is much more complex, and so the number of people in a group really affects how they operate. When you're in a group of just 3 people, there's only 2 other members aside from yourself. It's very different than having 10 other people in the group. So just know that. Go ahead and pull this up from the PowerPoint slides, this link, which is a YouTube video. And this is on the topic of groupthink. And groupthink is one of the drawbacks or one of the dangers of group work. Okay, so pull up this clip or search in YouTube on 12 Angry Men. This is a clip of from a movie. It's about what happens in the jury room. So during a murder trial, actually. And it really kind of shows some of the pitfalls of what's called groupthink. I mentioned that size matters, and this is not completely agreed on for scholars. I think the most common range that a group is defined is from 3 to 11. Okay. So 2 is too small. And then once you get beyond in the upper teens, it really is not a small group. It actually turns into what's called a large group or an organization at that point. Power plays a big role in small groups. Okay, the ability to influence others. There's a couple kinds. There's power over, which is the ability to help or harm others. Yes, there's people out there who do that. And then there's the power to, and that's the ability to empower others to reach their goals. So power can be constructive or it can be destructive. There's different ways that you can exert power. You can reward people. You can coerce people. And then there's different types of power. Legitimate power, where you're in a position of power and you achieve that through legitimate means. Another way that you can have power is you can be an expert in certain areas, and that's going to give you more power over others. Let's talk about interaction patterns a little bit in small groups. There are what's called centralized and decentralized interaction patterns. In centralized patterns, 1 or 2 people hold central positions and most or all communication goes directly to them or is funneled through them. Decentralized patterns promote more balanced communication. As you might suspect, the power of individual members often affects interaction patterns. If 1 or 2 members have greater power, a centralized pattern of interaction is likely to emerge. Decentralized patterns are more typical when members have roughly equal power. So I'm not going to say one is better than the other. I think balance is important. Certainly you can have groups where that have too much centralized patterns of communication or too little centralization. So in that case, sometimes decisions can't get made if you don't have people in positions of power that are kind of dominating, for lack of a better term, the communication a little bit more. So I think you want to strike a healthy balance here in terms of how centralized the communication is. You want to include as many people as you can, but some people are going to take the lead, and that's for the best. Norms in small groups. Norms are guidelines that regulate how members act as well as how they interact with each other. Group norms control everything from the most trivial to the most critical aspects of a group's life. Some are inconsequential and others are more substantive. Okay. We're not going to be able to go in depth on these, but again, norms are something that grow directly out of interaction. Okay. Kind of naturally arise. And so there are different rules. Rules oftentimes are in a written form somewhere, in a rule book or a guidebook or a manual, etc. But don't downplay the importance of norms. Just like in real life, as you know, this is another term that came up early in the class. Norms really affect and control how people behave. Standard agenda is one of the most common forms of decision making and problem solving. And I apologize again because my window is covering up some of the text here, but it's just a step-by-step process. It's really logical. Define a problem, gather and analyze evidence, establish criteria for a solution, generate and evaluate solutions, select and implement one, and then monitor how it goes. So the prescription, according to the author, for working in groups is be constructive in your participation. Show leadership, and here's another term and concept that's come up before, is conflict. Manage the conflict. Conflict is going to occur in groups. It just will. It's just the nature of it. It's the nature of being human. And but conflict, just like in real life or in groups, just like in real life, can be beneficial and can help to make the group stronger. So this is the activity that I wanted to do. I'm going to try to rework this so we can do this virtually. Again, as I stated at the beginning of this presentation, we're going to I was going to put you in small groups and have you come up with what you think the biggest issues are on campus. And then we're going to use one of the decision-making processes to determine, to narrow down that list and to pick what we felt were the top issues on the campus. Okay, that's going to conclude this presentation, and I'll just see you in the virtual classroom. I hope you're all doing well.